26. Moon Shadows. The stream had shrunk into a thin, forced torrent as the rumbling phases of the city edged together. The temporal interface in the air crackled above its course. Mercury was flooding across the wide banks, drowning the sea of light flowers and creating silvered lakes in the bizarre moonlight. The older peccary had built a fire on the higher ground away from the stream. The other phasals gathered around it as the old captain produced 2 dusty bottles out of his coat pockets. Ace used the corkscrew on her IC Swiss Army knife to open them. 1 bottle of Entre-Trois Mondes Curve, produce of Trispheres, and 1 bottle of cheap cooking sherry, both remnants from the TARDIS's wine racks. These would have been better from the 3rd phase of the city, where they've had a chance to mature longer, said Peccary. They'll do, said Ace, and swigged at the sherry. The phasals passed the bottles between them. They had been silent since Ace had spoken the forbidden. They exchanged glances as if they no longer needed to speak words to communicate. Against all the despair and destruction that worked around them, Ace caught a new sense of relief in the group, a definite warmth of rediscovering something precious and long lost. She had caused that. It could not be wrong. They lay among the flowers on the trembling ground like the spokes of a wheel, their heads towards the hub of the fire. Both the Peccaries and Amnoni Distoyisor, Chesspearl and Ryogus, with their outstretched hands intertwined and their futures doomed. Tiny curls of grey drifted from the ground around them, the germinating shoots of smoke that sometimes grew up in the still air to form a forest in this place. Overhead, the new moon coursed slowly up from its birthplace, shrouded in the clouds of dust that rose from the crumbling city. Ace sat near to the phasals, the warm glow growing in her. The drink was going to her head, but it didn't matter right now. There'd been nights like this on Horsden Hill, a fire and her mates, and drink and whatever, and a hangover in the morning. She understood the memories she had triggered in the phasals, their previous lives on Gallifrey, the homes and families they had forgotten. Things that in similar circumstances she would have tried her damnedest to leave shut in the cupboard. There was enough to worry about already. If the TARDIS was protecting the Doctor, how safe were the rest of them? The ship seemed to use them as it pleased. They were the resources available, but the Doctor was the only one the TARDIS really needed. The fire flickered up into fantastical shapes at the heart of the thought wheel. Different colours and strange landscapes in the flames and rising smoke. Listen, do you hear it? Time is stirring, like the ice breaking on the rivers of Gallifrey in spring. Yes, I can hear. Friends, we are meeting once more. Your thoughts are lacing with mine again. How rich is this? Speaking with words is so unbearably slow. Gallifrey, do you remember the blazing sunlight in the open sky? Not just night, but night and day. And the green forests and the golden fields and the burnt red deserts. And the wind moving the leaves and the water. The smoky cities full of other people's faces and thoughts, the endless flowing and muttering of the air. The great imperial merchant ships carrying the slaves from other worlds and the games and the heroes. We shall find a way out of this grey, dead prison now. Time is moving, the shackles have broken. Now we remember. We begin a new future. You remember Pazithi Gallifreya, the copper moon who shines even in the sunlight. Better than that miserable, sickly object, said Ryogus aloud, pointing up at the sky. They all laughed at Ace's startled look. And remember the children? The pilot! Exclaimed Amnoni Distoyisor. We forgot him. He should be with us. The urchin pilot snitched the half-biscuit from the alcove. He didn't understand why the flowers had been left there, nor what the strange letters Shonzi that were scraped on the stone meant. It was just as stupid as the offerings to the gods that the phasals left beside the dial square. He always snitched those too. There was slime on the street where Ace had attacked the process, and there was black blood in the slime, but it hadn't done any good. The only way to destroy the process was from the beginning. The Doctor had told him that when he was asleep. Delete the process before it is even born, so that it had never existed at all. It was happening at last. The beginning was up in the sky, waiting to start again. And he had to tell the doctor. "Don't forget to remind me," said the doctor in the dream. "One day I'll need you to remind me." Until then, he had to steer clear of trouble, and steer clear of the future, his own future, the future that was waiting to get him. But the doctor had disappeared, the goik had got him. And now the whole city was scrunching slowly together. The buildings were crumbling and rocking, like the dust castles Shonzi sometimes made on the banks of the stream. "Shonzi!" The name in his head startled him. It was their voices. Ryogus and Nonni and Chesspearl and Peccary, all of them calling just like they used to before they got boring and grumbly and didn't talk to him anymore. "Shonzi, where are you? It'll soon be time to go." He could have told them that. Silly old grumblies. A moon shadow fell across him. A guard stared cruelly down. He recognised it. His lost future chittering angrily. The Shonzi guard. He turned and ran, but a whip cracked and stung his legs. It dragged him back through the flowers. The urchin yelled and kicked as he was lifted off the ground by those familiar hands. "Shonzi, where are you?" called the voices. "Help me!" he yelled. The guard faltered for a moment at the sound of the voices. By rights they called him too, but he, Shonzi, no longer existed. He could not hear, so he did not listen. The hands tightened into claws, and Pilot was dragged screaming away. "We must find him," Amnoni despaired. This was the first outburst, after several minutes of silent gesticulation between the phasals. They still lay on the ground in a circle, staring up at the dust-filled sky and waving their arms like overturned beetles. "Find who?" butted in Ace. "I don't know where the doctor is, but that creep Vale's probably with him. And we know what's happened to Shonzi." There were more silent recriminations between the crew. "Oi!" Ace complained as she walked round the circle. "Don't mind me in all this. I'm just a token div-brain human. Who are you after?" "Not Shonzi, but the pilot Shonzi," said the older Peccary. "The kid? Aren't there rules about child labour where you come from?" Chesspearl sat up and turned to Ace. "We're sorry, Ace. After so long deprived of our own powers, we do understand how difficult it is to exist as a non-telepath." "Thanks," said Ace. "I'll just think aloud so that you don't miss anything vital. If you all talk like that at home, Gallifrey must be the quietest Dullsville in the universe." "You must be joking," said Ryogus. "It's just about the noisiest. There's not a minute's peace." "We will find a way back now," said Amnoni. "The chain of time is broken, but we need the pilot." "The guards have taken him," said Captain Peccary. The older Peccary was touching his own cheek with his fingers, running them along the gully of the scar. "And we must find him before there's no more Shonzi at all," said Ace. "I get the picture. They'll have taken him to the tower, and I bet that's where the doctor is headed too." "A bet," said Ryogus. "How much?" There was a grinding crash from the stream. Mercury fountained up and the air flared and crackled with static. The two banks of the cities were grinding together, sending tremors across the time and space. Through the tumult they heard the cracked whisper of the process. "The world, it is being renewed. Escape, there is none." The guard captain, the third of the Peccaries, stood between the phasals and the city. Its guards chittered as they closed in, whips uncurled, blocking all chance of escape. Chesspearl pulled Ryogus back before he could even start to retaliate. "Where's my guard?" he said, suddenly too afraid to think. "There's no Shonzi either," said the oldest Peccary. Ace stared at the 5 guards. 4 of them were tall, the doomed futures of the phasals. But the 5th was shorter. It moved slowly in, its whip raised, the repulsive eyes squirming on its enforced helmet like the Medusa hair. Ace shrank away from it. In the original guards, this was the creature that had carried her to the watchtower. But those guards were dead now. This group of guards was the second group of phasals. They were in her future too. Why had she assumed she was exempt? Her future was all tied up. She was as much a victim of time's tyranny in this world as the rest of them. She was trapped on the same sinking boat, drowning in a flood of mercury and black blood. Somehow, sometime, she would be caught and recruited as well, forced back into her own past to enslave and torment herself. And finally, she would die, useless and wasted, fodder for the process's insatiable hunger. The vileness of it ached her every bone. She turned away, wanting to scream. The oldest peccary caught her in his thin arms. "It can be changed," he whispered. "The possibilities are infinite from every second." Ace could not speak. "The phasals," croaked the leech's voice through its captain. "Bring them to the watchtower." "No," called the youngest peccary. "We have a different future now. We are a crew again." Silent glances between the phasals confirmed their alliance. "We reject you as our future," they chorused aloud. The oldest peccary called a warning as his youngest self stepped defiantly forward. "Obedience," stated the guard captain. "You are all summoned as guards." The ground shuddered as the colliding time phases tore against each other. Ace saw her guard raise its scorpion whip. She yelled in horror. The tongue cracked across young Peccary's face. He screamed and fell forward. Blood was running down his cheek. The oldest captain clutched at the wound on his own face. The other phasals clustered around their wounded leader. As they pulled him up, Ace saw that his eye was torn. She launched herself with a scream towards the monstrous guard that she was doomed to become. The old captain pulled her back. "But I have to," she yelled. "I have to stop it." "Not yet." Again, the remorseless voice of the process croaked through the throat of its instrument, the guard captain. "Escape, there is none. The future, it is already planned. It cannot be changed."